Hello, and welcome back to Amateur Philosophers Play Games. I'm Noah, your host.
I'm Justin, the guy who's playing the game.
This is the show where we play video games and discuss philosophical ideas, problems, and philosophize about random topics. So, Justin, today we've got a bit of an interesting topic for you, and for our audience as well. I texted you earlier and told you what it was. I don't know if this is a very traditional philosophy question, but I think it's something interesting.
Oh, it's definitely interesting.
Yeah.
And I think it is a very philosophical, I think there's a whole class on it at my school.
Yeah. So, without beating around the bush any farther, the question I wanted to ask is to you and to the audience and whoever else would be interested in answering, where does a person's taste in entertainment come from? So, I suppose we might have to define what that is, what a taste in entertainment is, but where does it come from? What does that mean? So, let me give an example to make it concrete. I think concrete examples help a lot. Let's say movies.
You like thought experiments and
a lot of thought experiments, because talking about concrete topics is easier to go from the concrete to the abstract than the other way around, in my experience. Mm-hmm. So, let's use movies, for example. I think that's maybe not universal, but movies are very common. Most people at least know of movies, and most people, I'd say, have some kinds of movies they watch. So where do you get a taste in movies? Let's say action movies, for example. Like, if you're the kind of person who enjoys 90s action movies, like, when was Die Hard from? Is that...
See, it was before 9/11 because he was smoking in the airport. So
that's a way to test it.
I'm going to say 90s.
Sure, let's say 90s. You know what? I have a computer in front of me. I can look it up right now.
I'm going to guess 95.
Die Hard.
93. Final answer.
1988. Okay, there we go.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so let's say if you enjoy...
I'm genuinely surprised.
Late 80s to early 90s action movies. You can say you have a taste for that, you know. Taste, we typically say, is subjective. It's something you enjoy, but you don't necessarily make a claim that it is the best. It is objectively the best, the platonic good of the movie. No, I don't think... there might be, but most people wouldn't claim Die Hard and its ilk are platonically the best movies, but you can say these are my favorite movies. So where does that come from? Like, how do you determine that? Like, for example... It's somebody. In fact, Justin, I think we were talking earlier. You tend to enjoy those kinds of late 80s, early 90s action movies, right? You have a taste for them.
When action movies were the best.
Yeah, but you know what they say. The good old days were the days when you were getting into it. But whatever. But for me, I don't.
Wait, am I at a shop finally? Do I get to buy stuff?
Ooh.
I only got 5 rupees though.
Well, make them count. Don't spend them all in one place. Yes, but the question is, so I don't personally have a taste for those sort of things. I don't dislike them, but I just am not particularly interested. So how does that come about? Like, you and I were about the same age, where we have similar upbringings, not the same, but similar. So how do we get to these two different things?
Okay, so you're asking about how taste comes about.
Yeah, let's start with there. I think that's probably easiest.
I think a good indicator is that it's like things you get impressions from when you're younger. They imprint on you. Something you have a positive experience. Like, for instance, you and I have similar upbringings, but I know for a fact you did not watch movies as a young child. You read books.
I watched some movies, but not nearly as many. Yes, I typically, when I had free time when I was a child, I would read books. That's correct.
There's hardly a day in my childhood I would venture to say that, like, I didn't watch a movie unless we were at Disneyland or something similar. Like, every day we watched some kind of movie, usually either with dinner or something about. So I feel like those movies were things that, like, were an impression on me, and I associate with. I can pick up a chicken?
Sure.
I've got a chicken.
Can't put them in your inventory, I don't think, which is unfortunate. Now throw the chicken.
Oh, okay. That was very unimpressive. So yes, I feel that those movies stuck with me because I have a taste for, I grow to appreciate them because I had to watch them so much.
Okay, so it's familiarity. And I think what you're saying is right. For example, I would say I have, now we're getting into books, I would say I have a taste for fantasy and science fiction literature, especially YA, young adult, for those of you not in the book, young adult fantasy and science fiction, because I read a lot of that growing up, I enjoyed it, and that has shaped my enjoyment of things here. But there's a question, though, like, for example, why did I get into fantasy and science fiction? Why not, I don't know, romance, or what other genres of, why fiction in particular? Why didn't I get into reading textbooks as a kid? Like, what made the distinction there?
You know, Noah, I could totally see you being the kind of kid who read textbooks, though. So
look,
I mean,
I like to read a variety of things,
including textbooks.
Philosophy.
No,
is a
you're one
philosophy
field that
textbook
likes
really a textbook, or is that just philosophy? Look, all I'm saying.
Okay, fair enough.
But the point still stands. Why did I get into science fiction and fantasy and not other genres? Why did you get into I mean, you were saying action movies. Are you much of a, let's say, chick flick movie guy?
Me, I'm not.
So
no,
why is that? I
to...
mean, did you just not watch those movies?
Yeah, I think that, like, the few that I had watched, for instance, like, my mom loves the movie Ghosts, with, oh, I'm blanking on his name. What's his name?
I'm not.
Big heartthrob of, like, the 90s.
You can look it up as well.
Patrick Swayze. Patrick Swayze. Like, I'd seen that, and I'd seen a few other, like, chick flicks, but, like, they weren't big in my house. But also, I kind of, I guess, a counter to my point, you like anime.
I do.
But from what I gather, none of your family watches anime unless you, like, strap them to a chair and make them.
More or less, yeah. And that's the other interesting thing, because I can distinctly pinpoint, I only started watching anime in college, essentially. I'd watched a little bit beforehand, and I'd read some manga in high school. For those of you non-weebs in the audience, manga is essentially Japanese comic books, and anime is Japanese animation. They have a very distinct storytelling and visual style. It's a whole thing. I don't know.
It's a whole thing. It's amazing.
It is.
Defend it.
You know, amateur anime fans play games that are, what would that be, our 5th or 6th channel at this point? Well, we'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
But not today. Not today. But that's the point. I voluntarily chose to immerse myself in that sort of thing. But even then, I only would say I got into it because I can. This is very interesting. I can trace back. So I would say I only got into anime because I enjoyed reading manga, which, like I said, is Japanese comics. And anime and manga are very similar in many ways. And I only got into manga because I believe I first got into Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh manga, and because I had liked Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, the card games, as kids. So how did I get into those? Because a friend got me into them. So the chain still goes back to, I guess it's just your environment. It's a long chain, but it seems like it goes back to there.
I agree. I think that's exactly what it is. I think it's just an amount of what you've been exposed to. Because there are things that, like, I haven't been exposed to that I'm sure I like. Like, you and I, we went to China. Right. We were exposed to a lot of things, and I didn't know just how much I love Xiaolong Bao.
Dumplings, yes.
I love it. Amazing.
But, okay, this is a perfect example. You and I had never eaten Chinese food growing up, and well, not never, but I didn't regularly eat Chinese food growing up, and neither did you. You and I, we spent approximately the same amount of time in China, but I would say Xiaolong Bao, for me, dumplings, they're all right. I don't mind them, but I don't have a particular love for them, whereas you were just saying how much you do love them. Now, this is an interesting case study because it's not the difference in experience, it's not the difference in surroundings, and yet we formed different tastes about Xiaolong Bao. In fact, in this case, literal taste of the taste buds. But so,
yes,
I think this is a good way to get down to the crux of this issue. What is the difference? Why did one of us like one thing and the other? I'm not going to say I dislike them, but they're okay for me.
Okay. So your question is, how is it that I love them so much and you
right.
don't?
Because so far we've said, oh, it's just all about what you're surrounded with. But now we've reached a point where we were surrounded the same amount. We experienced, I'd say, you and I experienced about the same amount, and yet the results were different. So what could cause the results to be so different in this case?
I think it's the same thing. I think, well, no, maybe not. Not sure because I think they're really interested in this slate thing I have in the tablet. They really like the tablet.
They're living like a low, not quite medieval, but slightly above medieval society, and you've got super sci-fi magic plate. Of course, they're interested in it.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it comes down to something. I think it also gets into. We had a previous episode on personal identity and what that is, and what makes a person that person. And I think if we pushed it too hard, we'd just end up talking about that, like what makes up a person.
This is
because I
a
feel
facet
like
of what makes up a person. Your likes and enjoyments are definitely a part of your identity, not the whole thing, but certainly an important part of it. So, I don't know. Perhaps this, because to add another example, I've been thinking of. I think we can. There's another reason there's another problem, to put it clearer, with your tastes are only what your upbringing is, your surroundings. I'm going to use music for this example because that's what I'm thinking of. I'd say oftentimes your music tastes are what you grew up with. If you grew up with people who listen to rock, you probably listen to rock. If you grew up with people who listen to hip hop, so on and so forth. But do you think it would be possible if you grew up around people who listen to screeching noises, just dissonant, loud, painful noises all the time, and called it music, would you develop a taste for it? I don't think so.
I think that your your survival, like your what's the word I'm looking for? Your not instincts, but kind of like survival instincts would kick in, and you would just become a very disturbed individual.
Yeah.
Like your evolutionary biological like training would kick in, and you would just be brought up with anxiety.
Is there there's you're saying there's something inherent in humans inherent in humans that tells them what music is and what isn't, which is an interesting proposition. I'm not disagreeing, but I hadn't thought of it that way.
I think it could be that because, like, for instance, if you don't know this, if you do like a wavy motion, like you take your hand and you make it go back and forth like a snake to a child, they like an infant, they will naturally be afraid of it.
Interesting.
Like it doesn't take like they didn't never being exposed to a snake, nothing like that. If you do that, like we've been hardwired to believe, like we've been trained over time that motion is not a good motion and that we should be afraid of it. So I think that there is something in us that like the opposite of that. There are things that we brought that are soothing. So, for instance, screeching noises, well, that sounds like an attacking animal. That sounds like something that where, like, my adrenaline should be pumping. I should be worried. And there are things that cool my adrenaline and make me calm. And those things are like lullabies, kind of. You're exposed to that, and you get sleepy, you get tired. They're pleasing, right? Because they make you feel like you don't have to worry.
Yeah.
I think that's where you start. And then as you grow older, there are just things that calm you because of whatever background you're from. So, for instance, I enjoy listening to Queen. Why? Because I find it very relaxing.
Yes. But this is interesting because there is music out there, let's say some of the harder forms of metal that I don't think is very relaxing. It tends to be very loud, dissonant, a lot of screaming vocals, like a lot of very rough electric guitar sounds. Now, I think this is an interesting point to diverge. So we could say if it's just purely the sounds of screaming, wailing, and metal screeching on metal, close to nobody would enjoy that. But for that kind of hard metal, there are people who enjoy it, and there are people who don't enjoy it. And distinctly, there's a difference. There are distinctly people who take pleasure in it and that kind of music, and people who would actually be pained by it and pained to listen to it, which is very interesting because again, this gets to the question of where does that divide get in? Because apparently this part isn't inborn. I guess the question I'm asking is, what's the border between screeching noises and screeching music?
Well, I think that if you gave screeching music, quote unquote, to an infant, they would not be happy with it. I think that that's something you have to develop over time, and that there's something about like either the lyrics, there's some exposure, like you with Pokemon. Someone recommended it to that person, and then they listened to it, and it like connected with them on some level, and that's why they feel like comforted by it. It's not because it's actually soothing; it's because how do I put this? That music made them feel good because of the time they were in and like the place, like whatever it was they're associating it with a good feeling. Somehow it's comforting to them.
Yeah.
But I think, let's see, next page. I thought when you sent me the question, I thought we were going to talk about what makes like how do you, like what does it mean to have taste in music?
Yeah.
Or taste in movies? What does that mean? Because I feel like what it comes down to is just a very early on set of impulses and comfort that's given to you that slowly develop over time given your varying circumstances.
Yeah.
For instance, I suggested, like, you don't seem like a heavy metal kind of person. You seem much more like a classic rock kind of person. But yet I exposed you to Sabaton, and you seem pretty happy with that.
I agree.
And there's not really a reason for it.
I agree.
But you and I have similar upbringings, and so it makes sense.
And look, growing up, I did listen to some like classic metal. Like I've listened to a fair bit of Iron Maiden in my time. Wow, we're hitting all the old pop culture. But so yes, I would say I have some experience with metal, but you're right. I have more experience with classic rock. Although, sorry, I'm getting on this. I'm just so interested in this. Recently, and by recently I mean the past year or so, I've been getting into like pop punk a bit, which I have very little to no experience with growing up, and no one in my family listens to. I don't even really know. If many of my friends or people close to me listen to it, I'm not aware of it. So where does that come from? I mean, again, it's a similar music genre, but it's not. Green Day is not the same thing as AC/DC, you know?
This is very, very true.
They're kind of similar, but not the same. But I don't know. I guess you could just say it's related. Again, it's
semi-related.
It's the chain I was talking about earlier, where one thing leads you to another, but it kind of originates back to something you experienced. This is interesting. But yeah, you're right, Justin. What you said. The real meat of the question is, what does it mean to have a taste in music or movies or books or people or cars or anything really? Like, what does that really mean? And then I think once we get that, there's one more interesting question. What does it mean to have good taste? Because we do use that phrase in common language, but we'll get to that in a minute. So I think, first of all, we have to say, most people would agree taste is subjective, right? Like, you can have, you have a taste for Hallmark movies. Well, I don't, but you do. I'm not claiming that it's wrong in a moral way or something to watch. There. For those of you keeping track at home, ethics came up. We're what? There you go. You can mark that off. You can mark that off your check boxes. But I'm not saying it's morally wrong to like Hallmark movies. In fact, if you enjoy them, good on you. I just don't.
Right. I actually asked my brother, who's a screenwriter, and I asked him, like, what is it? I asked him the question you gave me. What does it mean to have good taste in like movies? And he made a very good point. It's the ability to discern what is like factually good, even if you don't like it. So, for instance, Citizen Kane. Like, if you ask anyone in the film industry, they will say like the best, and I'm using quotes, like the best movie is Citizen Kane. It's like the greatest movie of all time. If you watch it though, it's very boring.
I mean, I watched it. I actually quite enjoyed it, but you know.
Okay, it's boring, Noah. I don't care what you say. It's boring.
But see, there we go. Okay, this is the taste difference. Like, you and I can both agree it is a good movie, but one of us got enjoyment out of it and the other did not, or less enjoyment anyway.
Right. And so I think what it comes down to is Citizen Kane. I forgot exactly all the things it did, but it broke rules. There was nuance.
Right. There was nuance.
Right. It
developed,
something.
I believe, new filmmaking techniques and makeup ways and acting tech. I remember it was a groundbreaking movie in many ways.
And so that's what makes it a good movie. And even me, someone who did not enjoy the movie particularly, if you have good taste, you will say, I didn't like it, but it's a good movie. Like, it was a good movie. It did great things. And I have to recognize that. Otherwise, my movie palette, as you might say, just hasn't been developed enough. You could also say the same thing for, like, wines. If you enjoy, like, $3 bottles of wine, well, okay. But you have to be able to, like, that doesn't mean you have bad taste necessarily. what would having bad taste would be if you had, I don't know, a 36, I forgot, Margot, which apparently is a really fancy wine, and you like were drinking it and you were like, this doesn't taste good, or like if you were like, it's not a good wine, if you said it's not good,
Yeah.
that like you could say, I don't particularly like the wine because I don't like, I don't know, Margot's, or I don't know, whatever kind of wine it is. You could say, I don't particularly like that kind of wine, and so like it doesn't taste good to me, but I can see all of the things that make it what it is and say these are really good. Like, I guess that could be what it is.
Right.
What makes it what makes an action movie an action movie? Well, there's shooting, there's like,
violence, but people.
There's violence.
The goal of the movie is to see action scenes, I would say, generally in an action movie.
Right. And so if you see a movie and it has those things, but they're done really poorly, you could say, well, that's not a good action movie, even if you enjoyed the movie. But you also have to recognize like movies that you don't particularly like, and say, well, it had action scenes that met all of the boxes. It was a really good action. Kind of like if there's the epitome of action movie, it checked off a lot of boxes that make it an action movie that were done really well. And that's what having good taste is. And it's being able to discern between, oh, this has no real, it doesn't meet the quality, it doesn't meet enough of the boxes to be considered this, versus it does. It doesn't actually have to do with whether or not you like it. It has to do with your ability to recognize what that media has done.
So I think what we're doing here is there's a difference between subjective enjoyment and objective quality. So subjective enjoyment, we kind of talked about that's what we were talking about earlier in this episode, right? Where, you subjectively enjoy action movies because you were exposed to them as a kid. I subjectively enjoyed science fiction novels because I was exposed to them and grew up with them. Mm-hmm. But the objective quality is something outside of your personal enjoyment. Now, of course, this gets down to the very important question: how do we judge the objective quality of... I'm going to use art in the broadest sense of the word to include music and movies and books and paintings and wine and whatever else. But how do we judge the objective quality of art? Like, what makes a objectively good movie in the most outside objective sense? Because now I know the first inclination would be, it's technically good. The film shots are advanced and the lighting is good, but then you see the problem. The lighting is good. What does it mean for lighting to be good? Let's say, thinking back to my very limited film education, good lighting is lighting that, say, highlights what you want to highlight. Well, okay, but isn't that essentially a subjective value of the modern film industry? I could easily conceive of an alternate universe, or even, say, 150 years in the future, where the quality of film, a good lighting shot is considered one that bathes everything in uniform light. Now, how can we say that, our idea of good lighting is the correct one and the other idea of good lighting is the incorrect one? Because we're trying to get to the objective truth here, the capital T truth, the Platonic truth, however you want to say it. The truth above human opinion.
I think you are, I want to say, misunderstanding what this would be, because I think that at the end of the day, it is I don't want to say subjective, but it's a social construct that we've made.
If you want to learn all about those, watch the video about social constructs on this channel.
Yeah. I think it's something that we've made up. So for instance, like we were defining what an action movie is. Well, really there's just a story that's being told, and we've categorized them. So right, usually they're based off some kind of, however loosely, they're based off of something that's happened in like some real life experience. And we've taken those life experiences and we've categorized them into genres. And we say, well, what makes it action? And whatever it is, we've defined action, and we're like, okay, so this makes it, I can pick this up. I'm going to climb these stairs. I don't know what it does, but I'm gonna do it.
That's the Breath of the Wild experience. I don't know what this does, but I'm gonna do it. Yeah. Actually, real quick, we've been talking about philosophy a lot. What in the game are you attempting to do at this point? Like,
Well, at first I was trying to get to the Emma, I think that's her name.
Mm-hmm.
And see what that was all about. And now apparently I'm gonna go find the 4 beasts. I think is what she said I was supposed to do.
I see.
So now I'm gonna find the 4 beasts. Can I jump? How do I jump? Okay, that's how you jump. Okay. But yes. So I think. Oh, that I jumped over it. I can do this. I can do this. Jerry, I know you're watching, and I don't care how you snicker. Okay, I can.
You don't come to this episode, or you don't come to this channel for the high quality speedrun techniques. You come to this channel to hear two bros ramble about taste in music and how that relates to Play-Doh. So yes, go on with your thought you were saying earlier.
All right. So what was I saying? I'm trying to think. Nope. Okay. What was I saying? Help me out.
You were saying something about I was misunderstanding, and something about social constructs.
Right. So it's a social construct. So we have these life experiences, and we put them into categories, and we give those categories names. And then saying it's a good action movie is just saying, well, how well does it tell this story, and what does it do to tell the story? How does it use? What makes an action movie an action movie? An action movie would be something that has fight scenes, and it doesn't focus too much on the story as much as it focuses on making you excited and getting your adrenaline going in a not an intimidating way but an empowering way.
Right.
So you want to be you want to relate to the antagonist and be like, oh, I'm not going to go down. Oh wait, I have the thingy.
Yeah. What? Jump into the bottomless pit. What could go wrong?
I mean, I've got the thing, right?
The paraglider. Yeah. See what happens.
The way you're
honestly,
saying it,
I don't remember. I don't remember if this is a bottomless pit or if this is just a pit you can jump into and float down. So find out. Oh yeah.
Let's hope I don't die.
Well, we are waiting on.
So
Link's
I think. Yeah. Oh. I think I can make it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, it depends on whether or not I can stop this and then climb.
Yeah, you can.
I can climb!
Ooh,
whoa! Look at
nice.
that. Oh, goat. Gotta kill the goat.
No.
Maybe. Nope.
Poor goat.
It died so that I might have meat.
Anyway, you're talking about what makes a good action movie. Well, let's back it up.
Right.
What makes a good movie? What makes Citizen Kane a good movie and The Room a bad movie? What are the metrics you use?
Like I said, I think that Citizen Kane, when we say good movie in this sense, we're saying it does something extra. It doesn't it. So a movie in general is just meant to tell a story, right? That's why you watch a movie.
Among other things.
You want to hear this story, right? And so Citizen Kane tells a story, but that's not what makes it the good movie, right? That's just what makes it a movie. What makes it a good movie is the impact it had on the industry or on the art of filmmaking, right? It played with new ideas and it developed them and it made them better somehow, right? And that's what makes it a good movie.
Okay, so
that's what makes that's what makes it cinematically a good movie. You can't look at that movie and be like, oh, it's not good. You have to admit, no, this is a good movie. I just don't particularly like it. I think it's boring. And if you think otherwise, Noah, you're wrong.
Mm-hmm. Right. Again, that's the subjective enjoyment you get out of it. But yeah, I see. I think I see your point. But so are you trying to say that in this case, good means original? Because I can think of many things that were original but were not very good. Probably. I can think of many original things that failed. For example.
Such as I'm trying to think of what.
There have been many. See, it's hard to say. Oh, what's a famous thing that's failed? Well, it doesn't really get famous if it didn't succeed, But
okay, here's a good option. I think Rocky Horror Picture Show is a movie. I think I told you.
Yeah,
about it
I know of it.
It failed in the box office. It bombed.
Yeah,
it's terrible. That's why it's a cult classic because it was terrible in the box office. However, I think it's a good movie. I watch it. I've seen it live. It's a good movie. And I think that, once again, having good taste would be recognizing that, as a movie, it's a story. Is it good? Does it do a lot of things?
But back up. You say, as a movie, is it good? Well, I'm asking, what does it mean for a movie to be good? Are you saying original? Because it's not... Okay, I think the problem with that is there are good movies and books out there that are not particularly original. I'm going to jump over to books, something I'm thinking of. Jane Austen. She's not very original, per se. Like the idea of, stories about rich people who talk to each other a lot. It's not a new idea, but you'd be hard-pressed to find someone in the literature world who would say Jane Austen is not a good writer. In fact, I think most people would agree practically all of Jane Austen's books are very good literature. So it can't just be originality. And
no, I think that what that means is that whatever genre Jane Austen is portraying, she checks off a lot of the boxes that make it what it is. Like, it's entertaining. I don't know who Jane Austen is.
You don't know who Jane Austen is?
What genre? Like, I probably know the books. I just
Pride
don't
and
know
Prejudice?
the name.
Emma? Sense and Sensibility?
Okay. That's what I thought. Okay. So, as some people call them, those chick novels.
Okay. They weren't back when they were first written, but I see.
Those novels are written, and they check off a lot of the boxes that, qualify them in that genre, right? So, wait, I want to cook.
You have to hold something in your hand.
I have to hold the food, right? That's what I have to do. So I think, yes. So whatever genre, I don't actually know what genre that would be, but whatever genre that is.
Literary fiction, I think, which is not literary fiction is the English major's genre for saying, it's about people and it's kind of realistic.
It's about people and it's kind of pretty good. But yeah, I'm not sure particularly what genre that would like, because it has to be more specific than that. It can't just be just
all right,
that,
fine.
Right?
Let's pick a classic science fiction novel. I saw the movie the other day, so Dune, the original science fiction novel, very good science fiction novel. I've read it before. It's very good. And this is interesting. My personal enjoyment of it, not the highest. I did get something out of it, but I can say as a science fiction fan and as a book fan, it is objectively a good novel, right? A good book. So again, but what makes it good? It's science fiction. Fiction. But
so science fiction is a genre where you have our laws of physics, our natural laws that are extended somehow. So like they're more advanced. We have advanced more to better understand the laws, our current laws of physics.
Typically,
and science.
or they can be, for example, there's plenty of science fiction out there where it says like, what if we had our normal understanding of physics, but one thing was different? For example, we discovered I don't know if you've ever played, I haven't actually played it, but I know of it, the game Mass Effect, where the idea is it's our understanding of physics, but with one big lie, that being matter that, an element that can create negative matter, or something, a lot of science fiction things that would be faster than light travel. Based on our current understanding of physics, faster than light travel really isn't possible from an energy perspective or from a hypothetical perspective, but a lot of science fiction novels will say, but it's possible this way. So yeah, I would say, sorry, I went on a little sci-fi tangent. Science fiction is typically either extending our current understanding of science and predicting the future, and or with a few exceptions that are usually made pretty clear or explained. Like, yeah.
So somehow, whatever novel you're thinking, whatever sci-fi novel, Dune, right? Yeah. You said that meets certain criteria that we've developed as sci-fi, right? So sci-fi can't just be, you have this really good idea, but then there's no story, right? Because that doesn't make it a good movie. A movie tells a story, so it has to tell a story, right? That's entertaining, so it has to engage an audience. That's one box. It has to play with the laws of physics in a intriguing way, which is usually meaning some kind of nuance, right? It has to have something that hasn't been outdone, or it has to take something that's been outdone and somehow make it better, right? It has to add to it in some way. And there's several other boxes, but meeting those boxes is what makes the sci-fi movie a good sci-fi movie. What's a really bad example of a sci-fi movie? Sci-fi. Well, okay. Arguably, Rocky Horror Picture Show is a sci-fi movie.
Goodness.
The opening song is a science fiction double feature.
Okay, let's stick to something I think more people would define as science fiction.
Well, no, I think it's good because the whole point of the movie is it's making fun of, like, the 70s and 60s sci-fi movies, like The Blob and like King Kong. Like, it's making fun of those movies, and so it's like pointing all the tropes. That's why it failed, like, miserably in the box office, I think. So I think that, like, it doesn't meet enough of the boxes to be a good science fiction movie, but it meets enough of the boxes for, like, cult fans who are crazy.
It's an enjoyable experience, but it's not. But we keep coming back to this. Like, okay, so far we've said what makes again, I'm going to use the word art in the loosest sense possible. What makes a good piece of art is it is original and or it checks all the boxes for its genre. But aren't those two kind of the opposite? Like you were saying earlier, Citizen Kane was good because it broke all the rules and didn't check or unchecked the boxes or checked boxes that we didn't know existed. So is it an either or it has to be both? Or how does this work?
I'm trying to think. So you're saying...
So basically, our discussion, as it is wont to do, has meandered quite a bit. So I'm trying to boil it down to... something you could put as a header, for example. So I'm trying to say, what makes let's stick with movies because I think that's probably the easiest. What makes a movie good? A objectively good movie, not subjective taste, objective quality. One point we said was, it's new and it breaks boundaries or it's innovative in some way. And then
Okay, so it doesn't have to be new, it has to be nuanced. So you, like Jane Austen, you can tell a story that's been told 1,000 times. But do you do it in a way that brings in elements that haven't been, like, used before? And do you do that well?
See. So that's what I'm saying. You said haven't been used before. I would say innovative would be the term for that.
Okay.
But,
So an innovative movie,
yes,
right? Okay.
Innovative. And then you were also saying the other qualification would be it checks the boxes and meets the qualifications for its genre or its... I don't know, medium, what have you. Which, I see what you're saying. There are typically... Okay, there we go. That's where I'm getting hung up. So we typically say, okay, yes, there are boxes to check for a science fiction movie. It has to have a strong story, have, I don't know, a cool, interesting world. The fictional part of the science has to be both clearly enough fictional, but also believable enough that it doesn't break suspension of disbelief.
The rules within the universe.
Yeah, the in-universe rule. And I'd say that applies to fantasy as well. The in-universe rules should be clear and well defined, or at least if you're going to make them undefined. Like magic in the Lord of the Rings is very unclear, but it's intentionally that way. It's not, you're not quite sure what magic can do, but that's intentionally done. So either way, for quick tangent, for those of you who are interested, I would highly look up the difference between a hard magic system and a soft magic system. Very fascinating if you're interested in fantasy. Anyway, back to philosophy. So that has to be intentional, but so those are all boxes we say, check those. If you check those, no. To be good, a movie has to check those boxes. Now my question is, where did we get those boxes from?
Oh, okay. So where did we get those boxes? Where did we come up with these? I think that just goes back to very early on. Like, do people want to watch it? Is it something that draws you in? Is it relatable? Like, does it, I don't know, tell the human experience, like, or is it just something, I think that is a big part of it. It has to be relatable. You can't make a movie or a story that, like, is really niche to you.
Right.
Because if it's not relatable, people are going to be like, oh, this is stupid.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely a box that people... I'd say in most, especially writing, you want to say it's relatable. But again, how did we come up with your box that's being relatable? For example, going back a few thousand years, the ancient Greek, say the Iliad and the Odyssey, but Paris and Achilles, they're not relatable people to the audience listening to them. They are explicitly non-relatable. They're explicitly more than human. They're superhuman in some way. So is that's obviously a very different culture, and a very different idea of how to create a story. So is that all right? Like, can we say, even though Odysseus and Odysseus and Paris and all the other characters from the Iliad and the Odyssey aren't relatable, it's still a good book because it was good back then? Or how do we navigate that?
So I think that you're taking it too literally to be relatable. I think that... Hold on. Yeah, who's this doctor guy? I haven't heard of this guy. I haven't heard of this doctor. I think that you're taking it too literally to be relatable. Just because someone isn't exactly like you doesn't mean you can't relate to them in some way. I think that being superhuman is what's relatable. It's that desire they see, like when people read it, they see what they want in and of themselves. For instance, let's take Hercules, just because I haven't read the Odyssey. Hercules, dude who's super strong, right? Me as a guy, as a male, I want that. Yeah. That's something that I relate to, right? Being stronger than anyone else, being able to, I don't know, somehow skin a lion whose skin is impenetrable. Yeah. Somehow he manages to do that. That's impossible, right? That's something that I would relate to. So it exemplifies part of the human experience and makes it relatable. I see what you're saying.
Okay, I think a better term for this, since I actually tend to spend a lot of time in this corner of YouTube, I think a better term for this would be escapism or power fantasy, which, if you're familiar with any kind of literary or book or anything fiction, those are typically negative connotations, which I don't think they should be. I agree. Like, Hercules is so strong. I want to be like Hercules. That's a form of wish fulfillment, I think is what the term people calls it, which is not a bad thing, but that's not really the same as being relatable. The relatable, I think I see your point. The relatable part of Hercules is he has marriage troubles. He has anger issues. Oh, I can relate to that. I can see that in my own life. But he can tear a lion apart and go to the god of the underworld and tell him to give him his wife back and all these other cool things. Those aren't relatable, but those are something I wish I could do. So it's sort of fulfillment of vicariously living through this fictional character, wish fulfillment, or which, again, if you tend to frequent the part of the YouTube which is literary and movie and book and criticism, you'll tend to hear them throw around the words wish fulfillment as a bad thing, which in excess it is, but I think in small quantities is important in any kind of fiction. Because you're right, if it's not... I would say in most books, if you're not getting something, escaping in some way or fulfill... I'll need to come back to this. I'm not gonna talk about it today, but I've actually kind of been trying to come up with a personal definition of what is art, and I think this is an important part of it. Maybe we'll get to that in a future episode. I'd like to, but I think that would be a little too... I need to work it out first. So stay tuned for This Amateur Philosopher Tries to Tell You What Art Is. That'll be... I'm sure that won't have any problems.
No, I think you and I have really good taste in art.
Oh, yeah.
We're definitely qualified.
We're definitely qualified. How's that video gaming going?
I'm about to die.
Yeah, exactly. So
let's eat something.
Is there more to say about this? We've hit quite a few different topics. And for those of you keeping track at home, this would be the field of philosophy known as aesthetics. I think we've jumped around into a lot of different fields of aesthetics, but aesthetics is generally the study of beauty and art and goodness, but not moral goodness, more of what we've been trying to get at. Art goodness.
What is eye-pleasing?
Yeah, pleasing. There we go. It doesn't have to be eye-pleasing, like music is part of aesthetics, but you get the point. So yeah. So if you're interested in doing more your own topics, your own research into these topics, I don't know. I mean, we've talked about quite a bit, but I think...
Oh, wow. I did not expect him to one-shot me. Also, that's a really weird way to roll down a hill.
Yeah, Link does some funny physics in this game, which, that's another thing we could have talked about. What makes a video game good, which... That's a whole different ballpark. I don't quite feel qualified. We're amateur philosophers, but also we're something of amateur gamers. We don't spend a ton. I mean, speaking for myself, I do play video games on occasion, but not that much, and I don't have a long history of doing so. And is it the same for you, or?
I played a lot more when I was younger. A lot more when I was younger. I got to college, and then like I don't know, books were a thing, and I had to do them.
We kind of swapped, honestly. I read a lot of books growing up, and then in college I started playing some video games. You played video games when you were younger, and then in college, I guess you started reading books. I still read books in college, but you know.
He did. He read a lot of books in college. So, I mean, well, for instance, okay, actually, Link Falling is a good example. That, I would say, even though I'm enjoying playing Breath of the Wild, I would say that is a fault in the game. Oh wow, okay, I gotta like, he really does. All right, I got this. I'm gonna get this guy.
Oh boy.
So him sliding like that is a fault of the game that makes the game not as good of a video game. Why? Because it's not believable. Like, I was like, that's weird. And I think if you were serious and you put on your critic hat, you want to be like the dude from Ratatouille, and you're watching this, and you're like, that's not good. Like, it shows that, like,
but
it takes away from the experience.
It's interesting because for a lot of people, like myself included, when I first played Breath of the Wild a while back, I saw that Link could do, I think in gamer terms they call it ragdoll physics or something similar like that, where you sort of flop all over. I thought, oh hey, this is one, it's amusing, which that's got to count for something, right? But two, I thought, oh okay, this is interesting. I wonder if there's any interesting properties I can do with this. And I never really got around to it, but I have seen online. If you look up Breath of the Wild, high quality Breath of the Wild gameplay, it's insane. You can do things where you use your bombs to launch yourselves over great distances. You can like fall across buildings and then not take damage if you jiggle your control stick right. It's very impressive. So giving that sort of depth to a video game at the cost of, I don't know, someone who's not as invested, thinking it's a little unrealistic, is that a good choice? Maybe. I'm not enough of a game critic to make that call, but you see the point. It's so again, I guess going back to our definition of what makes something good earlier, you would have to say, oh well, what are the boxes you need to check in a video game, and is it okay to say check one hard? Well, this is where the analogy breaks down, because I think there are levels of quality. Like there's a difference between, you can have a story with good dialogue and you can have a story with dialogue, oh, hey, that's really cool. There are levels to it. It's not good or bad. But we've been talking about it very binary, just to keep the discussion simple, but yeah. So there's that question of, oh, can you make one part of the game better at the cost of another part? I don't know. That's an interesting discussion on its own, but I think that's beyond the scope of what we can talk about today.
I think it's pretty relevant. I think it's easy enough to talk about. I think that, for instance, okay, you brought up. We can talk about it. You brought up that it's ragdoll. Yeah. Okay, you brought up that it's ragdoll. See, me as someone who isn't a video game connoisseur, did not realize that was a category within the genre or within like video games. Right, I didn't realize that was part of it. So maybe that was done deliberately. In which case, me as a amateur in gameplay, doesn't have the palette suitable to appreciate things like that. Like, if I'd known that was intentional and there was a purpose behind it, then it becomes meaningful, and I can say, oh, well, I don't particularly like that in this instance. Like, the way he rolls is, oh no, my headphone died.
Oh no. But yeah, I see.
There we go.
I see your point, but then this is what I was talking about earlier. So let's say if we decide, because we were saying what the boxes are to check is sort of cultural. We never really got around to deciding how exactly you make those, but I think we've been saying it's mostly cultural, right? More or less. So
well, I think the way I figured it out was the group of people who do whatever it is. So people who make video games, people who make movies, they form a consensus on, like, these are things that are good, and they do it for various reasons. It could be because, like, that's what people like, but it could also be because, like, there's some deeper meaning to it, and, like, that's why they do it. But that group of people have come together and, as a group, decided this is what's, like, these are the boxes to check.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a good point. So let's say currently in the year, in the late 10s and early 20s, the video game people, I don't know who these people are, but the people you're speaking of have come around and decided, oh, hey, having a game where Link can fall off cliffs and bang around and roll around like that, oh, that's a good thing. So let's say, fast forward hypothetically 50 years in the future, if the video game community comes together and says, oh, well, Link bumping around and rolling around, that's a bad decision, you shouldn't do that. Does that retroactively make Breath of the Wild a bad game?
Argue that yes.
Interesting.
It does. So,
okay. So
for instance,
so that's
like,
what I was saying earlier about, well, the Iliad and the Iliad and the Odyssey, they were written with very different ideals of what makes a story good. So can we 3,000 years later, or is it 3,000? It's a little more than that, right? Several thousand years later, retroactively look back and say, oh, the Odyssey is not very good because Odysseus is too smart, or the story of Hercules isn't good because he doesn't get enough control over his actions, or things like that. Because, okay, that's a perfect one. I'll use, again, concrete examples. In fiction, let's say, the modern idea, there's a big idea of, what's the term? Agency. Your main character should have agency, as in your main character should decide her fate, right? So, if your main character gets blown around by the winds of outside forces, and doesn't have much control over that, that's typically seen as a bad thing. Now, that wasn't necessarily the case back when people were telling the stories thousands of years ago. So can we the story of Hercules, for example, he doesn't really get a lot of choice. Like, first of all, he was born of a mortal woman to Zeus, which made Hera jealous, so that's not in his control. Okay, that's fine. And then Hera curses him to go insane and murder his family, and that's not his fault. And so
no, geez.
You know what? I think if the person who wrote it and everyone who heard it and everyone else is dead, it's probably safe to spoil. But yeah, he goes Hera makes him go insane, kill his family, and then he has to go do 12 tasks to appease them. And he does those, but then afterward, Hera intervenes again and says, well, sorry, that doesn't really count, and I don't care. So Hercules doesn't have much agency. And if I were reading a modern book like that, I would say that's a bad thing. So can we retroactively, in the year 2022, go back and say, well, that makes Hercules a bad story, even though it wasn't at the time?
A bad story?
I mean, because it wasn't really a book. They didn't really have the idea of books. It was more a collection of stories, but sure.
Well, I think that, once again, this goes back to the discernment part, where it's like, you have to recognize that for what it was at the time, it did things that were great, and you could say, like, it's not enjoyable now, but just because it's not enjoyable does not necessarily mean it's not good. The main goal isn't necessarily, oh, I thought it was a small boy. It is not a small boy. That is a big boy.
That didn't, I mean...
Hey, this is how I got the last one, man. You just gotta whittle him down.
Well, we might be here a while.
Okay, but yes, so just because it's not enjoyable doesn't necessarily make it not good. It just means that, it's not particularly enjoyable to you.
Right.
But you have to be able to recognize that, no, it does really great things. It broke ground, it was really influential. And you have to say, no, it's a good story.
Right, but that's what I was saying.
Otherwise, I would say you don't have good taste. Like, your judgment is flawed in some way.
Right, that's what I was saying. Remember, you're missing the point I was asking. It was, remember I was saying earlier about Link, if 50 years in the future, we can, the game community decides that Link being able to flop around is a bad thing. Can we go, but nowadays, okay, currently, I think the consensus is that's a good thing, or at least a neutral thing. Whereas, let's say, hypothetically, 50 years in the future, the game community people decide that's a bad thing. Can they say that Breath of the Wild was a bad game, even though Breath of the Wild, when it came out, did break many grounds and have a lot of ingenuity and inventiveness and stuff like that? So can they look back at the past and use their idea? And that's what I was trying to get at the point with Hercules. Can we, with our modern definition of what makes things good or not, go back and say, well, Hercules is actually bad now?
Okay, I think you're saying it exactly the way it needs to be said. Because originally you said, like, can they say it was a bad movie? Or was it a bad game? No, they cannot say it was a bad game. They can say it is. Like,
so you can say
but
its
they cannot
quality
say
could change
it was
over
bad.
the course of time, is what you're saying.
Right, because that is the subjective aspect of what is good. It changes over time. That changes over time, right? Whether or not it breaks ground or does something new or innovative, that doesn't change. Either it is innovative or it's not. Either it does something new or it doesn't.
Right.
And you can't, and like the effects of it are also like objective, right? I don't know what like rules or like things that Breath of the Wild has done, but or
let's say, for example,
way it's impacted.
The super open world freedom gameplay. I mean, I don't think it's totally unique, but for the time when it came out in a few years ago, it was pretty groundbreaking and pretty special.
Right. So doing that new way, right? Doing this in a new way, you can't say like it didn't change the way other games now are developed and made, right?
Because it definitely has.
Try to
off
mimic.
the top of my head, I believe Horizon Zero Dawn is a game that's definitely been inspired by Breath of the Wild, which I haven't played it, but from what I've heard, that is also a very good game as well.
So you can't deny that it has that impact, and so you can't say, "Oh no, it's a bad game." Like, no, it's a good game. You might not enjoy playing it, but you can't sit there and say, "Oh no, it doesn't. It's not a good game. It didn't do anything beneficial." Like, it definitely helped, like, the video game community as far as like developers go, and like making other things better, other parts of video games better. Like, Breath of the Wild might have impacts that like we don't know yet, right? Someone might play this game in 20 years, back when it's retro, and then find something that's really cool that we didn't notice, and then from that make a whole new genre of video games.
Yeah.
And so you can't say that like, no, it doesn't do something, it's not impactful. But I think, for instance, The Great Gatsby.
Yes.
Good book. Love the book. Also, Leonardo DiCaprio. Love the movie.
The movie was solid, not as good as the book, but whatever.
No, but it was still good. It was pretty good. So that's a good movie, or I mean, that's a good book. But if I remember correctly, it was terrible when it came out. People were like, "This is trash."
Interesting.
And like, didn't he not make? I don't think he made money off that book.
I don't recall.
Okay,
but
I think it was a deficit.
We need to slow down here, because that's talking. We're again. What I'm trying to get at is, we have the subjective enjoyment, which we can say is totally subjective, even to the individual. But then the quality we're trying to say is objective. But if it can change over time, it really isn't. It's just subjective, but with a bigger subject.
What do you mean the quality?
Well, that's what we've been saying, right?
The quality stays the same.
Is it? Because that's what I've been trying to get at over the time. What do you mean by what do I mean by quality? What do you mean by quality? I don't know.
So by quality, I've been using it at least. They'll pay. Oh no, what are they gonna pay for? What do I want? I am clueless. Oh, monsters. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Monsters. I'm getting to them. Okay. Anyway. Side quest. Oh. Side quest? I accepted a side quest? I did not mean to accept a side quest.
Got to accept a side quest.
Anyway,
it's the law.
I think that I've been using quality to mean like the impact or the influence that a particular media had on that community. In some way. And that can span over time. So for instance, like I was saying with The Great Gatsby, at the time it wasn't a good movie, or it wasn't a good book, right? It was like people were like, this is terrible. But later it had a giant impact on like looking at America and like critiquing capitalism and or the American dream, and saying like life isn't always the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Like,
you might get over there and find life is just as empty as it was when you started. Yeah. Right. Okay.
And so that impact is undeniable.
Agreed.
Like, you can't say The Great Gatsby didn't inspire other works in some way. Not even as like copies like the movie, as in people looked at America differently. They were like, oh, what does this mean? Like, should we be chasing after the green light? I don't think so. Spoilers.
Yeah.
So I think that impact is undeniable, and you can't. If you sit there and say that The Great Gatsby isn't a good book, I think you have an ignorant palate. You haven't been exposed to enough good literature to like be a good judge. So, like for instance, if you've only seen 2 movies, Citizen Kane and I don't know, Happy Gilmore, and you think Happy Gilmore is a better movie, you just don't have a palate. Like you aren't exposed enough to appreciate like what Citizen Kane is.
Okay, well, here we go. The interesting thought experiment. Let's say this person has seen 2 movies, Citizen Kane and Happy Gilmore. They think Happy Gilmore is a better movie. Great. Now, this person sits down and watches 1,000. Well, that's a lot. 1,000 movies. Sure. Thought experiment. And then
I've done it.
At the end of these 1,000 movies, 1,000 movies across a wide range of genres and ages, eras, whatever. And then at the end of these 1,000 movies, this person sits down and watches Happy Gilmore and Citizen Kane again, and decides, you know what, Happy Gilmore still a better movie. What do we say then?
I say they have bad taste in movies. What they like is not basically. It's kind of like if your taste is like Yelp reviews, like it's not a reliable. Like the score you give it is not accurate to recommend to other people. Like you're just giving it a bad score, and it doesn't deserve a bad score, and so people should not listen to you when they're like, "Oh, what are some good movies to watch?" Whatever movie you say is probably not a good movie. It's like just not accurate. It's not going to be well received by other people who also like actually good movies. I guess is a good way to put it. It's like, should you be listened to when you recommend something?
Okay.
If the answer is no, then you have bad taste.
All right.
Okay, I need to eat something enduring. Eat some endurance. Oh, I can just eat the mushroom, right? The mushroom will give me.
I don't think so yet. Scroll back over. Do you have? It's a little hard to tell. I think the ones with the green wheels are endurance.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
Anyway, yeah. So I would say that like people who want to watch movies should not ask you for your recommendation if you have bad taste.
Okay.
That's what that means.
And they shouldn't ask you because you think. Justin, I'm asking you. Let's call this person Janet. People shouldn't ask Janet for recommendations because Janet's recommendations are not enjoyable. They're not of good quality, or both, or something else.
I would say that the idea is that whatever Janet recommends is most likely not going to be well received. Like, it's not. I'm trying to think how to say this. It is unlikely that if you watch the movies that Janet recommends, that you will enjoy them, because the majority of the community of people who watch movies say these movies are bad. So it's a matter of consensus where people are like, right, your taste is not what like people would enjoy.
Yeah.
Who actually who do this regularly and like make it like either a hobby or a lifestyle out of watching movies.
Right. Okay. So in the end of the day, it seems like it does come down to consensus, and consensus is subjective. It's just a subjective opinion of a large group of people instead of an individual. Can we say that?
I think that subjective base of the larger group of people is based on the objective impact of the work.
All right. I think that's a pretty good place to stop. We've wandered quite a fair distance, but we're running quite long at this point, so I think this is a good place to wrap it up.
We are, but I think out of the episodes, I think we've actually made some real progress.
Yeah.
I
can't wait for the professional aestheticians, philosophers who like aesthetics to come in the comments and tell us how we're trash and we don't know anything about anything. And also, we've thrown out quite a few pop culture references. I'm sure we'll offend at least someone with some of them sometime. Yeah. And I would be surprised if there's many people who watch this who will understand every single reference we've made, because we've made quite a few references to quite a few different pieces of art. And all right, audience, I'm going to promise you this. I don't know when it will be. One of these days, we will get around to defining what is art. I'll give you my opinion I've been trying to form. Justin can tear it down. We'll have a good old time. Not today though. We're running. We don't have enough time.
We'll talk about the urinal, the German urinal. It's art, apparently.
Yes, exactly. All right. Well, with that all out of the way, thank you so much for watching. This has been a enjoyable discussion for you. If please leave a like if you think that this has been subjectively not very enjoyable, but objectively a good YouTube video. You should do the artistic thing and leave a like. Comment in the comments about how our subjectively we're enjoyable, but objectively we're wrong about everything we say. And subscribe so that you can catch up to all the bad other philosophy-based puns I make. Not even puns, philosophy-based jokes I make in the outro. Yes. With that all out of the way, that'll be it for today. See you next week.